The dust settled on the windswept street of Cottonwood Springs as Sophia Dawson stared out the window of her father's general store, her future as bleak as the horizon during drought season. Tomorrow, she would be forced to marry Harold Pickering, a man 30 years her senior with cold eyes and a bank account that had captured her father's interest but left her heart unmoved. It was May 1878, and at 20 years old, Sophia had hoped for more than an arranged marriage. Her mother had died 3 years prior, leaving her father Walter to raise her alone, a task he approached with the same pragmatic efficiency he applied to his business ledgers. The drought had nearly ruined them, and Harold's offer to clear their debts in exchange for Sophia's hand seemed, to Walter, a fair trade. "You'll learn to love him," her father had insisted the night before, not meeting her eyes as he counted the day's meager earnings. "Love is a luxury, Sophia. Security is what matters in this world." Sophia wiped the dust from the counter, her fingers tracing the worn wood. "What about happiness, father? Does that not matter at all?" Walter Dawson had merely sighed, his weathered face showing a moment of regret before hardening once more. "Happiness doesn't put food on the table." Now, as the afternoon sun beat down on the small frontier town, Sophia arranged canned goods with mechanical precision. Her wedding dress, her mother's, altered hastily by Mrs. Peterson, hung in her bedroom like a shroud. She had one day left of freedom, one day left of being simply Sophia. The bell above the door jangled, pulling her from her thoughts. She looked up, expecting to see Mrs. Jenkins for her weekly purchase of flour and sugar. Instead, a tall figure silhouetted against the bright sunlight entered the store. As the door closed behind him, Sophia could make out a young man, perhaps 25, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. Dust coated his clothes, suggesting a long journey, but there was a quiet dignity in his stance that caught her attention. "Afternoon, miss," he said, removing his hat to reveal tousled dark hair. "Might I trouble you for some supplies? My horse and I have been on the trail for 3 days straight." "Of course," Sophia replied, professional courtesy masking her curiosity. "What do you need?" "Coffee, bacon, beans," he listed, approaching the counter. "And if you've got any fresh bread, I'd be much obliged." Trail rations wear thin on a man's patience. As she gathered his supplies, Sophia felt his eyes on her, not in the appraising way she'd grown accustomed to from men, but with genuine interest. "You're new to Cottonwood Springs," she observed, wrapping the bacon in brown paper. "Just passing through," he confirmed. "Name's Yates Avery. I'm heading to my uncle's ranch near Silver Creek. He's taken ill, and I'm going to help run things for a spell." "I'm Sophia Dawson," she replied, surprised at how easily her name slipped out. "Silver Creek is a good 2 days' ride from here." "Then I'll be grateful for a proper meal and a real bed at your hotel tonight," he said with a smile that transformed his face from merely handsome to devastating. Their fingers brushed as she handed him his parcels, and a jolt of unexpected awareness passed between them. Sophia withdrew her hand quickly, conscious of her engagement and the impossibility of the flutter in her chest. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Avery?" she asked, her voice slightly higher than normal. He studied her for a moment. "Just one thing, Miss Dawson. Is there somewhere in town a man might find a decent meal? One not cooked over a campfire?" "The Silver Spoon serves supper until 8, she replied. "Mrs. McIntyre makes a fine beef stew on Wednesdays." "Much obliged," he said, placing his hat back on his head. "Perhaps I'll see you there this evening?" Before she could respond, the door opened again, and Harold Pickering entered, his substantial frame blocking the light. His small eyes narrowed at the sight of Yates. "Sophia," he said by way of greeting, ignoring the customer. "I've come to discuss the final arrangements for tomorrow." Yates glanced between them, noting Sophia's sudden pallor and rigid posture. "I'll leave you to your business," he said quietly, nodding to both of them before exiting. Harold watched him go, then turned to Sophia. "Who was that?" Just a customer, passing through, she replied, hating the tremor in her voice. Harold moved closer, the scent of tobacco and expensive cologne making her stomach turn. I've secured Reverend Phillips for 2 o'clock tomorrow. Your father has agreed to close the store for the occasion. Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. You should be grateful, Harold continued, his voice lowered. A girl in your position with your family's debts. Well, not many men would be so generous. She looked up at him then, searching for any warmth or kindness in his face that might make her future bearable. She found none. Yes, Mr. Pickering, she said, the words bitter on her tongue. I am aware of your generosity. After Harold left, Sophia closed the store early, claiming a headache. In truth, she needed to escape the suffocating walls that seemed to close in with each passing hour. She walked to the edge of town, to the small creek where she had played as a child. Sitting on a flat rock, she allowed herself to cry perhaps for the last time. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Harold Pickering, and tears would be an unaffordable luxury. Miss Dawson? Sophia startled, hastily wiping her cheeks as she recognized Yates Avery's voice. I'm sorry, he said, keeping a respectful distance. I didn't mean to intrude. I was just watering my horse. She noticed the dappled gray gelding drinking downstream. It's fine. I was just thinking. Yates hesitated, then approached slowly, as one might a skittish colt. Forgive me for saying so, but those looked like mighty troubled thoughts. Sophia laughed without humor. You could say that. That man in the store. He's your fiancé? Yates asked, sitting on a nearby boulder. She nodded, finding it strangely easy to talk to this stranger. We're to be married tomorrow. Congratulations, he offered, though his tone suggested otherwise. Don't, she whispered. Please don't congratulate me on a prison sentence. Yates studied her, his expression serious. Where I come from, marriage is supposed to bring joy, not tears. Where I come from, daughters do as they're told, Sophia replied, standing abruptly. I shouldn't be discussing this with you. It's not proper. Proper. Yates stood as well. With respect, Miss Dawson, there's nothing proper about forcing a young woman to marry against her will. You don't understand. My father owes Mr. Pickering a considerable sum. This marriage will clear our debts and save our store. So, you're being sold to settle accounts? Anger flashed in his eyes. That's not marriage. That's indentured servitude. His blunt assessment struck her like a physical blow. I have no choice, she said, her voice breaking. There's always a choice, Yates replied softly. Sometimes it's just hard to see. They stood in silence, the babbling creek and distant bird calls the only sounds between them. Sophia felt a dangerous hope stirring not for rescue, but for understanding. This stranger saw her plight with clarity that even her own father lacked. I should go, she said finally. It's getting late. Will you be at the Silver Spoon tonight? Yates asked, making no move to stop her. She hesitated. I usually help Mrs. Peterson prepare meals for tomorrow's boarders. But tomorrow's your wedding, he pointed out. Surely you deserve one last evening of freedom. One last evening. The words echoed in her mind. Perhaps I'll stop by, she conceded, not meeting his eyes. Sophia did go to the Silver Spoon that night, against her better judgment. She told herself it was merely to escape the stifling atmosphere at home, where her father avoided her gaze and spoke only of practical matters, who would mind the store during their absence, how Harold had generously offered a week at his hunting cabin for a honeymoon. The small restaurant was busy, but Sophia spotted Yates immediately, sitting alone in a corner. Their eyes met across the room, and he stood, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. She hesitated, aware of the curious glances from townsfolk who knew of her impending marriage. Evening, Miss Dawson, he greeted her as she approached. I'm glad you came. I shouldn't stay long, she replied, perching on the edge of the chair. People will talk. Let them, he said simply. You're not married yet. They ate Mrs. McIntyre's beef stew, and Yates told her about his life growing up on a ranch in Colorado, losing his parents to influenza, working cattle drives to save money for his own spread someday. What about you? He asked. If you weren't in Cottonwood Springs, where would you be? Sophia blinked, surprised by the question. No one had ever asked about her dreams before. I've always wanted to see San Francisco, she admitted. My mother had a book with pictures. The ocean, the buildings. It seemed magical. It is, Yates confirmed. Noisy and crowded and wonderful. The sea stretches forever, and the air tastes like salt. You've been there? She asked, leaning forward eagerly.
Twice.
Drove cattle to the railhead in Cheyenne, then took the train west. His eyes crinkled when he smiled. You'd love it, Sophia. It's a place where a person can reinvent themselves. She felt a pang at the casual use of her first name and at the impossibility of ever seeing the city he described. It sounds lovely, she said quietly, but I'll never see it now. Yates reached across the table, his fingers nearly touching hers before he seemed to think better of it and withdrew. It's not too late, he said, his voice low. You could leave. And go where? Do what? She shook her head. I have no money, no skills beyond keeping store ledgers. You could come with me to Silver Creek, he suggested, then quickly added, my uncle has a housekeeper who could use help. You'd have a position, wages of your own. Sophia stared at him, stunned by the offer. You barely know me. I know enough, he replied simply. I know you deserve better than being traded like cattle. Before she could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Harold Pickering stood there, his face mottled with anger. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, glaring at Sophia. Your father said you were helping the widow Peterson. Sophia felt herself shrinking under his gaze. I finished early and decided to have supper. With him, Harold's voice rose, drawing attention from nearby tables. Yates stood slowly, his posture relaxed but alert. The lady was kind enough to recommend this establishment, Mr. Pickering. I invited her to join me as thanks. The lady, Harold spat, is to be my wife tomorrow and has no business dining with strange men. I'm not your wife yet, Sophia said, finding her voice. And I can dine where I please. Harold's eyes widened in shock at her defiance. This is what comes of giving you too much freedom, he said coldly.
Come.
I'm escorting you home. When he grabbed her arm, Yates moved with surprising speed, his hand closing around Harold's wrist. Take your hands off her, he said quietly, but with unmistakable warning. For a tense moment, the three stood frozen in a tableau of conflict. Then Harold released Sophia, turning his fury on Yates. You're interfering in matters that don't concern you, cowboy, he snarled. I suggest you finish your meal and leave town tonight. Is that a threat, Mr. Pickering? Yates asked calmly. It's advice you'd be wise to heed. After Harold stormed out, Sophia sat trembling. You shouldn't have done that, she whispered. He's an influential man in this town. And you're not his property, Yates replied, still standing. Not yet, anyway. The yet hung between them like a guillotine blade. I need to go, she said, rising. Thank you for supper and for your kindness. My offer stands, Yates told her. I'm leaving at dawn. If you want a different life, meet me at the livery stable. That night, Sophia lay awake, Harold's anger and Yates's offer warring in her mind. The practical part of her new running away was madness. She would be disgraced, her father ruined. But another part, a part that had been silenced for too long, whispered of freedom, of possibility, of a life chosen rather than assigned. As the first pale light of dawn crept through her window, Sophia made her decision. She dressed quickly in her sturdiest clothes, packed a small bag with essentials, and penned a brief note to her father. With tears blurring her vision, she placed her mother's wedding ring, the one she was to wear that very day, atop the note. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room, to her father, to the ghost of her mother who might have understood. "I cannot live his life." The town was still sleeping as she slipped through the silent streets to the livery. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would wake the dead, let alone the living citizens of Cottonwood Springs. When she reached the stable, she hesitated, one hand on the rough wooden door. This was her last chance to turn back, to accept the life laid out for her. Sophia. She turned to find Yates already mounted, leading a second horse, a gentle-looking bay mare. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I don't know if I'm brave or foolish," she admitted. "Maybe a little of both," he replied with a smile, dismounting to help her with her bag. "But I promise you won't face it alone." As they rode out of town, Sophia felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. The sun was just peeking over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and gold. A new day, a new beginning. They rode hard through the morning, stopping only to rest the horses at a small stream around midday. Sophia's thighs ached from hours in the saddle, but she made no complaint. Every mile between her and Cottonwood Springs was another thread of freedom woven into her future. "We should reach Clearwater by nightfall," Yates said as they ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. "We can get a proper room at the hotel there." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Rooms," she corrected softly. Yates looked startled, then embarrassed. "Of course, rooms. I didn't mean to imply, I know," she assured him. My reputation may be in tatters for running away, but I'm still a lady," he finished for her. "And you'll be treated as such, I swear it." They were remounting when the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Yates drew his revolver, positioning himself between Sophia and the potential threat. "Could be anyone," he murmured, though they both knew better. Moments later, 4 riders appeared, Harold Pickering in the lead, followed by Sophia's father and 2 men she recognized as Harold's business associates. "There," Harold shouted, pointing. "I told you they'd head east." Sophia's father looked pale and drawn, his eyes fixed on his daughter with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Sophia, what are you doing?" he called. "Come home now, and perhaps Mr. Pickering will still have you." "Still have me?" she repeated, indignation overriding fear. "Like damaged goods at your store, father?" "You ungrateful girl," Harold spat, urging his horse forward. "After everything I've done for your family." Yates kept his revolver steady. "That's far enough, Pickering." Harold sneered. "You think you can steal what's mine and ride away? I paid good money for her." "She's not yours," Yates replied evenly. "She's not anyone's but her own." Walter Dawson dismounted slowly, approaching on foot with his hands visible. "Sophia, please. This madness has gone far enough. Mr. Pickering is willing to forgive this indiscretion if you return now." "And if I don't?" she challenged, finding courage in Yates's steady presence beside her. Her father's face hardened. "Then the debt remains. We lose everything. The store, our home, everything your mother worked for." The mention of her mother struck deep, and Sophia faltered. "There must be another way." "There isn't," Harold said flatly. "Your father owes me $5,000. Without our arrangement, I'll take what's mine another way." Yates studied the older man. $5,000? For a general store in a town like Cottonwood Springs? That's robbery, not lending. Walter looked away, shame evident in his posture. There were gambling debts as well. After Sophia's mother died. Sophia stared at her father in shock. "You gambled away our future? And your solution was to gamble with my life instead." "I did what I had to do," Walter insisted. "What any father would do to protect his child." This isn't protection, Yates interjected. It's sacrifice. Harold's patience snapped. Enough of this nonsense. Dawson, take your daughter home. And you, Cowboy, you've made a powerful enemy today. Wait, Yates said suddenly. What if I could pay the debt? Everyone fell silent. Harold laughed first, a harsh, ugly sound. With what? The dust on your boots. With this. Yates reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small leather pouch. He tossed it to Harold, who caught it reflexively. The older man opened it, his eyes widening at the contents, gold coins that glinted in the midday sun. My inheritance, Yates explained, his eyes never leaving Sophia's. From my parents. I was saving it to buy land near my uncle's ranch. Your dream, Sophia whispered, stunned by his willingness to sacrifice it for her. Dreams can change, he replied simply. Harold counted the coins quickly. This isn't 5,000. It's 3,000, Yates acknowledged. But it's cash in hand, not promises on paper. Take it or leave it, Pickering. Cash today, or chase your debt through courts for years. The standoff stretched for long minutes, tension thick in the air. Finally, Harold pocketed the pouch. The debt is settled, he announced grudgingly. But don't either of you show your faces in Cottonwood Springs again. As Harold and his men turned to leave, Walter Dawson remained, looking lost and suddenly old. Father, Sophia said softly, I'm sorry it came to this. Walter shook his head. I'm the one who should apologize. I was trying to fix my mistakes, but I only made things worse. He glanced at Yates. Take care of her. I won't need taking care of, Sophia replied firmly. But I will accept his companionship, freely given and freely received. After her father departed, Sophia and Yates continued their journey in thoughtful silence. When they finally spoke, it was Sophia who broke the quiet. You gave up your dream for me, she said. Why would you do that for someone you barely know? Yates considered her question. I didn't give up my dream, he said finally. I just changed its shape. Dreams are funny that way, they can shift and grow if you let them. And what is your dream now? She asked. He smiled, the afternoon sun catching the blue-gray of his eyes. To help my uncle with his ranch. To work hard and save again. And maybe. He paused, suddenly uncertain. Maybe to see if a certain lady might find it in her heart to consider a man like me, once she's had time to know her own mind. Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest. Not the desperate infatuation of fairy tales, but something steadier, something with roots that could grow deep. I think, she said carefully, that I would like very much to know my own mind. And yours as well, Mr. Avery. Yates, he corrected with a grin. If we're going to scandalize 2 counties, we might as well use first names. They reached Clearwater as twilight painted the sky in deepening blues. True to his word, Yates secured 2 rooms at the hotel. As they parted for the night, he took her hand gently. No regrets, he asked. Sophia thought of the wedding that hadn't happened, of Harold's cold eyes, of her father's betrayal. Then she thought of the open road ahead, of choices unmade, of possibilities unlimited. Not a single one, she answered truthfully. In the months that followed, Sophia discovered strengths she hadn't known she possessed. At Silver Creek Ranch, she learned to cook for ranch hands, to manage household accounts, to ride astride instead of side saddle. Yates's uncle, Elijah Avery, a gruff but kind-hearted widower, welcomed her presence that brightened his home during his recovery from pneumonia. More importantly, she learned about Yates, his quiet integrity, his patience with green colts and stubborn cattle, his unexpected love of poetry that he read by lamplight in the evenings. She learned that his smiles came more freely around her, that his eyes followed her movements when he thought she wasn't looking. By autumn, when golden light slanted across the rolling hills and cottonwoods blazed yellow along the creek, Sophia knew with certainty what her heart had suspected that first day in her father's store, that Yates Avery was a man worth loving, a man who saw her as a partner, not a possession. They were riding fence on the north pasture when he finally spoke the words she'd been waiting to hear. "I love you, Sophia Dawson," he said simply, reining his horse to a stop beside a lone oak tree. "Not because I rescued you, or because you needed rescuing. I love the woman you've become when given room to grow." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, but these were tears of joy, not despair. "I love you too," she replied. "Not because you saved me from a loveless marriage, but because you gave me the chance to save myself." He dismounted and helped her down, keeping his hands at her waist longer than necessary. "I'm not a rich man," he said seriously. "I'm still rebuilding what I gave to Pickering. But I can offer you a life of honesty and hard work, and my promise that you'll never be less than my equal in all things." "That's worth more than gold," she whispered, her hands resting on his chest. They were married that November in a simple ceremony at the Silver Creek Chapel, with Elijah standing proudly for his nephew and Mrs. Caldwell, the housekeeper, sniffling happily for Sophia. There were no elaborate decorations, no fancy dress, no business arrangement disguised as matrimony, just two people choosing each other freely, with clear eyes and full hearts. 3 years later, as spring returned to Silver Creek, Sophia sat on the porch of their small house, watching Yates demonstrate to their 2-year-old daughter, Emma, how to pet a new foal. The ranch had prospered under their care, and they had begun to build a legacy of their own. A letter had arrived that morning from Cottonwood Springs, the first communication since she'd fled. Her father wrote that Harold Pickering had left town after losing heavily in a mining investment. The general store was doing well under Walter's renewed attention to business rather than gambling. He expressed regret for his past actions and hoped that someday Sophia might forgive him enough to visit, to let him meet his granddaughter. Sophia folded the letter carefully. The anger that had sustained her during those early days had mellowed into something like understanding. People made desperate choices when backed against a wall. She knew that better than most. "Good news?" Yates asked, climbing the porch steps with Emma in his arms, her dark curls so like her father's bouncing with each step. "My father wants to meet Emma," she replied, accepting their daughter's weight as the child scrambled into her lap. "He says he's sorry." Yates sat beside her, his arm draped casually across her shoulders. "Do you want to go?" Sophia considered the question. "Maybe in the fall, when the weather's cooler for traveling. I think it's time." He nodded, understanding as always. Family is important. Even the imperfect ones. "We've built a good one," she said, leaning into his embrace as Emma dozed against her chest. "The best," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And it all started because you were brave enough to choose your own path." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened girl facing a loveless future to a woman surrounded by love she had helped create, the transformation seemed both miraculous and entirely natural. She had once dreamed of San Francisco, of distant horizons and grand adventures. But looking at her husband's weathered hands gently stroking their daughter's hair, at the home they had built together, at the life they had chosen, she knew that the greatest adventure had been learning to trust her own heart. "No regrets?" Yates asked softly, echoing his question from years ago. Sophia smiled, contentment settling deep in her bones. "Not a single one,"